So good afternoon, everybody. I'm Paul Kriescher, principal of Lightly Treading. We've been in business since 1997, working in residential, but we also work in commercial buildings, and a lot of work these days in multifamily buildings. And most of you were in here when I was starting to talk about the fact that there's a few projects we're working on right now that are starting to incorporate solar into multifamily properties, even affordable housing multifamily properties. And why would you put it into an affordable multifamily housing properties? Anyone want to answer that? It's really obvious, if anyone wants to be so daring. Go ahead.
Lower utility bills.
Exactly. It's like the economics around solar. I don't know, how many people are here from NREL working here? Several of you. So you guys know this well. A lot of us, if you're here, you're enough of an energy geek, even though I'm asking you, are you an energy geek? By being here, you have some energy geek in you to begin with. But by working at NREL, you guys know the economics around solar have gotten so much better, so good. It has a lot to do with people in this room and other people who have been working there for decades that have helped bring that technology into reality, not just on satellites and things like that, but to bring it to reality on buildings, that it's now affordable to put it onto an affordable housing property in Brighton, Colorado, where there's one going up now, and there's going to be another one in Brighton actually next year, and we've got one in Louisville coming up as well, as I think about all that, that will have solar integrated. What I'm going to focus on won't be so much solar today, even though I'm starting to talk about that. I'll focus on energy efficiency, and particularly, as the title had it, we're going to talk about a very cool new program that's been brought about through legislative action of 4 years ago, and then some additional legislative action just this past year at the state capitol to allow for a program called CPACE, or Colorado PACE, to come together that allows for putting energy efficiency improvements and renewable energy, actually in this case too, onto existing commercial multifamily properties. There is a pilot program making it available for new construction multifamily and commercial properties as well. But it's been mostly focused on the existing side. So I'm going to do a little background on some energy efficiency factoid type stuff just to hopefully get your brains going, and then we'll talk through and go through the CPACE program. So I asked questions about, an easy question. Now I'm going to give you a harder question. Anyone want to try and tackle this one to start off with? What's the average annual per person cost? This is tough. I thought you guys would be really smart, so I wanted to make this a hard one for you. Electricity and natural gas in a single family home. I will give you some, it'll be multiple choice, so you don't have to be quite so smart. But this is based on Colorado Xcel Energy utility data that we have access to, that we've had access to, where it's come in now. So anyone want to guess? I used to teach at Colorado State University. If you knew how I gave multiple choice questions before, you'd be like, I know exactly where he tends to put the answer. But any guesses on that one? No? No one's brave enough to jump in on that? Okay. $508. Good. I'm glad you're brave. Thank you. I like that. So it's like I should have candy or something. Like, here, you get a light bulb. Would you like a light bulb? Here you go. We're giving away CFLs because LEDs are now the new technology, and we still have some. But please use it. They do save energy for sure. Okay. Anyway, answer was the middle one. 476 is where we fall for typical single-family homes. Now, I'm going to spend time on multifamily in this next part of this. And really, this one's focused on assisted living, so people that are there a lot of the time. But we do a lot of work with assisted living. And I'm just curious, is anyone here in the room, are any of you involved with owning or renting multifamily properties or commercial properties at all? No? Okay. So we'd love to help those people. So if you know anybody, tell them about this presentation and share our card if you like what you see today. But in the case of, so we go from 476 in a single family home to what we're seeing, and this is a smaller sample. This is just coming from 4 assisted living facilities and 1 multifamily project. So there's a much smaller sample, but we'd say this is in the ballpark. We're seeing essentially almost double, 45, say 90% more basically on what people are paying on the utility bill side in these, what should be very efficient, as you'd think about it, or I'm geeky enough, hopefully you guys would be too, to think about, like, you've got shared walls, many less walls on the outside. Why are these things so much less efficient? And it's because those of us who've been involved in this, as I've been since the 1990s, we worked a lot on residential properties, but multifamily properties have not until recently been focused on. And they're finally getting focused on. We saw, wow, these were built worse than the homes we were looking at back in the day. It's like there's just horrible problems in these buildings. And so they're leaching heat and sucking in heat in the summertime and not doing well on their electricity consumption side. So just lots of problems that we've seen in those properties. So specifically in this one, just to give you a little pictorial view on this, this is an example of Marycrest, one of the assisted living facilities that we drew the numbers from, but I'm focusing on. It's 2 buildings. This is their main building. This is a 55,000 square foot building. There's a 3rd story walkout on the back of the building. So it doesn't look like 3 stories, but it's below grade up here, and then on the back side it's exposed. So 3-story property. They have another 3-story property next to it, comparable, well, half the size. They were having tremendous problems before we went in. We started working on this property in 2012 already. And we still are involved, but the improvements have been done for a while. We're still involved there. But they were having huge problems with people complaining about comfort. Any of you in your own homes have a hot room upstairs someplace in the summertime? Yeah. Cold in the wintertime type of thing? Yeah. So some of the things we saw in this one are more extreme than what should be in your homes, but there'll be some things that you can apply to what we saw in this. So we were focused on, they wanted to drop their energy costs. I mean, they're spending $145,000 a year. So a lot bigger than what we have to pay on our residential bills, I hope. Hope no one's in that ballpark, right? Anyway, if you are, you need our help, like right now. But yeah, huge bills, and I know it's hard to say, well, how does that compare to other buildings? I'll show you in a little bit that this building was in the bottom 5th of all assisted living facilities that are in the Energy Star benchmarking tool. Some of you in the industry are familiar with that, okay? But it's a means of benchmarking utility bills. For property owners can do it voluntarily, or consultants like us can help them, where they benchmark it and compare their commercial, multifamily, industrial buildings. Unfortunately, it's not there for residential, but it's for these other properties where you can compare and see, oh, with other like buildings across the country, where do I rank in my energy consumption? And it's a very good starting point, because otherwise people are like, oh, 145,000, that's not bad, is it? I'm like, oh, let me show you. For the size of your buildings, it's not good. So start with that, but that's where we started, actually. I'm stealing my own slide here. So we started by benchmarking the building for them, and they came in. The scoring scale is nice and simple with the program. 1 through 100, 0 through 100. They came in at 21, whereas if you're 75 or higher, you're eligible to get certified as an Energy Star achieving building. So they were a very long way away from that. This property was built in 1998. Invert my numbers. 1998. So 1 year after I started my company, this was built. And it's very sad what we found in this building for how relatively recently that was built. It's also, just a note, I do this as a plug for the city of Denver, anyone who knows of property owners in Denver. Right now, they've been doing a great job of promoting this tool as part of their city energy project. And now Xcel Energy and other utilities have really been starting to promote this tool much more readily as well. It's not a requirement yet at time of sale, but I'm seeing a lot, and I don't think it needs to be, I'm seeing a lot of very good things being done voluntarily within the marketplace around commercial buildings, that this would be done at a time of sale, but to give people that sense of what's going on in their building compared to others. So after we benchmarked, part of what our firm does is we're engineers and consultants, but we like to get our hands dirty. It's something we take a lot of pride in, is that we don't just sit at a computer, we go test buildings. So we got in and we're doing blower door testing and infrared camera scanning, and we were doing airflow testing on the HVAC systems and combustion analysis and all sorts of good geeky stuff that helps us understand the building much better. And we started to find quite a lot of problems. Well, one of the big things we found was occupant behavior. How many people live in a home where you'd like to scold someone, or you do scold someone for how they behave with their energy use in the home? She's only going to call you out in front of a bunch of people on this. You know, got to do that. Yeah. Thankfully, my daughter, you know, I'm an energy geek. My daughter, who's 11 now, started when she was about 6 or 7 scolding me, which was good. I loved that. That she's like, Dad, you're leaving the room without turning the lights off. I'm like, sweetie, I'm going to come right back in. You told me. I'm like, all right, I'm turning that off. Come back in, you know, just a moment, turn it back on. If anyone wants to know, it doesn't damage LEDs, and it really doesn't wear out CFLs very fast. It can a little bit, I guess. To turn lights on and off, I'll tangent for a moment. Lighting, LEDs are very equipped to be turned on. Well, if you sit there and flick them on and off, I imagine there's a problem. But if you're turning them off and within 30 seconds turning it back on, it's not causing any problems with LEDs in the reading and research I've looked at. And they haven't been around long enough to know, for me, but I know they do accelerated testing, you know, to check that out. CFLs do have a little bit of problem with their ballast if you're turning them on and off a lot. So I just suggest if you're really coming back to a room in a couple minutes, leave the light on and don't turn it off all that often. But anyway, tangent on that. So some of the problems we found in this building, and we do find it in single family homes, somewhat comparably, is like, what the heck is that, right? Well, what this is, we're up in an attic, and this is actually plenum ductwork coming from a rooftop unit heating and cooling system. So it's their furnace, you know, one of their furnaces for the building, coming down. And alongside of it, we found holes that were big enough to drop people down into, basically, that were communicating down in between floors. And this allowed for when we first were inspecting in 2012 that, well, there's other pictures I don't have. This was part of the contribution for when we'd go into this attic space, that we didn't need to have cool vests or worry about really getting too overheated being in an attic for some time, even in the middle of summer. I think we started in June, so it wasn't the super hot, but it was plenty hot enough you know, at that time that we were digging around in there. It's because there was so much communication between the building, well, the attic space and the building, that we were having that. There was also another big problem in that many of these plenums, because that building has 6 rooftop units, if I'm remembering correctly, 4 of them had areas of disconnect because the contractor who was hired decided that it didn't need screws to put together the sheet metal. Duct tape was certainly sufficient, and the duct tape had long ago dried out, and sections had come apart, and with all the air pressure and movement on it, had pulled them apart to where there was a lot of nice cool air coming into the attic to make it nice for us and the pigeons. And every little being that was in there was happy as can be because it was a very comfortable place to be, where the people down below were not getting nearly the cooling that they should have been getting, and AC systems were running for incredibly long periods of time to try and make up for all this leakage that were happening in that space there beforehand. So I apply this to homes. This is a pretty extreme case, but we see examples of things like this in homes as well. So in this one, it just blows my mind. This is a place where, you know, there's elderly people and mentally disabled people living in this space. All of these air leaks are a perfect channel for fire to spread in a building very rapidly. How the fire inspector in 1998 missed this is mind-boggling to me. I'm like, someone gave them, I don't know, a beer and said, don't bother, it's all good. Okay, I won't bother. I don't know how else it would have been missed. But it was very troubling to see that, and I'm very glad it's now fixed. I'm very glad there was no fire that ever happened in that property before this was fixed, because it would just accelerated rapidly how that would have burned. So anyway, that aside, all the energy loss that they've been suffering through was made quite evident from some of this stuff. We also were looking at the attic. I know this may look like decent insulation, but these truss cords are only 3.5 inches high. And this is what they had for insulation really on this property in these areas. They did have some flat roof areas that had some more insulation, but in vaulted areas like this, this is what they had, which was, I'd say, 1960s grade. Again, in 1998, I don't know how it passed a city inspection. It's just unbelievable to me on that one. But you know, we were doing infrared camera scanning and seeing problems with their walls. We're on the outside in this case, so we're seeing a lot of heat loss. That's what we're looking at, not the blue so much, but the actual heat loss coming out of the areas where these attics were, and your rim joist areas and the like. And they have PTAC, or wall-mounted air conditioning systems. That was a source of heat loss. And it actually goes back to one of the occupant behavior items. One of the things we found in this property, to go back to where I had that little occupant behavior part pop up, is that the occupants there, you know, all of us, when we're living in a space, we want to have some control over our comfort. And so one of the things that people do here is that if the rest of the building was getting too hot or too cold, let's say it's getting too hot, a little bit too warm for them, they don't feel, now they do, you know, they didn't feel they had some control over the centralized heating system, so they tend to pop open windows. So, you know, that's classic of what we see in a lot of older apartment buildings. I see it in newer apartment buildings, honestly, still to this day because of poorly designed, you know, heating systems and poorly built envelopes. But in this case, they were popping open the windows. Well, one of the things we did, it was not our invention, it's been done before, it's just not commonly done, is that we actually had installed PTAC shutoffs that when the window opens, it shuts off the heating or cooling system to that individual room. Very simple. It was basically burglar alarm technology just to create a disconnect to the circuit to shut it off. But I had some great guys from Four Seasons Heating and Cooling that, and well, we had Four Seasons and also Mark Brandt, an electrician who was great, do the work on that. But they've got it in now half of the units. They've been doing it kind of in phases over time and still going to do the other half. But we got the ones where people always were opening windows and gradually going through the rest at this point. But it's been a big improvement because they can cool themselves down if they want on a hotter day, warmer day in the wintertime, but at least it's not still churning out more heat to try and get the room up to the temperature that is what you set at. We also now have given them, they have much more control. The facility decided they didn't want to give everyone complete control. Well, they've given them a little bit of bandwidth of control to adjust down and up the heating and cooling systems a little bit. They just don't want them completely shut off or completely blasting up, and some of the people aren't capable of necessarily doing that for themselves. So, been an interesting, it was an interesting part of what we found there. A lot of heat loss here down at the ground level, poorly insulated at slabs, just no insulation at slabs, actually, in that case, so some stuff there. Also with this building, we've been very much involved with using technology in the form of monitoring. So we believe in real-time energy management or monitoring as like an EKG of the building. And again, folks at NREL are probably very familiar with some more sophisticated things than we're even using. But we've been using equipment from power takeoff and E-gauge to actually monitor the electricity use in the building. This facility does not have, they have full-time on-site facility servicemen and women, but they do not have people that are particularly knowledgeable, particularly educated on how to watch and control the building. So we've stayed involved helping with that in exchange for shared savings with the property owner, and that's been very fruitful for both of us. But basically we're monitoring the building so we can see where their demand levels. And for this audience, how many people know on commercial or multifamily utility bills there's something called a demand charge? Does that ring a bell for a few of you? For most of us, I know for our homes, we don't have that in Xcel service territory. And there are some residential utilities around the country that charge demand, but most of them do not. Demand charge is a way that the utilities, they determined that if you're building in any 15-minute period of time on each month, well, they measure, what is, during a 15-minute period of time of any month, are you demanding the most electricity from the grid? So buildings like this can draw quite a lot, 150,000 watts could be the demand that they need. We need that for this 15-minute period of time. The utilities response is to say, hey, with old technology that we still have in our grids and things like that, since we haven't upgraded that, we have to just take that 15-minute period of time and assume that the rest of the time you might do that as well, and we're going to charge you accordingly. And I'll get into some pricing information on that in a moment. But it's more than half of the bill for most commercial and multifamily properties come from the demand side of the bill. So we look at consumption as well as demand very closely to help control costs and to control environmental impact and, and the like for properties. But I have this in here because I think it's an interesting story. This property had a commercial dishwasher, like many. They have a commercial kitchen in the main building. They have a smaller kitchen in the other building. A pretty large kitchen that they have there, like a big restaurant in that property. Their commercial dishwasher is supposed to be bringing water up to 160 degrees Fahrenheit. It hadn't been doing that for who knows how long, because when we went in to test it, it was not getting close to that. Yet, the heating element was running at 25,000 watts. So 25 kW coming from this one source to try and bring water up to 160 degrees and wasn't achieving it. So it was a mess on a couple of levels. For the short term, we've now helped them get a new dishwasher that is being heated by their high efficiency boiler with a sidearm heat exchanger now. But for a period of time, they went to chemical treatment on their dishes, so chlorine-based treatment to actually sanitize the dishes. But when we took this thing off, it saved them, about $130, well, more than that, 210, if I remember right, somewhere in that range per month. Maybe I've got it in an upcoming slide. But it was a huge reduction. Depends on if it's summer or other times of the year, because they charge different levels. But I don't want to get into bog down too many details with that. But it was a big energy savings by just figuring out that a commercial dishwasher was not working properly, getting it switched over to chlorine treatment for a period of time, and then getting them a high efficiency Energy Star dishwasher that's now not using electricity for heat, but using their high efficiency natural gas source to provide the heated water. Any of you who have electric heating for your domestic hot water, I strongly recommend looking at upgrading to natural gas. Natural gas prices are not going to go skyrocketing, as we can tell, at least for many, many years. And it costs at least 4 to 5 times on the dollar side to heat 1 gallon of water with electricity as it does with natural gas. So just something for you to be thinking about. So I'll go through this quickly. We found lots of things, all the holes in the attic, the ductwork that I talked about, brought the attic insulation up to an R40, and that's a very good standard for residential properties, as well as this type of property. LEDs, they really have LEDs everywhere now. They've gotten rid of almost all their CFLs are gone and been replaced with LEDs. We put in occupancy sensors in the hall lights. I don't know how many of you have been in a hotel recently. Notice how the hall lights are always lit up for you when you go into the hallway, and by code it's good. You need to have at least 4 foot candles of light, which is really only about the amount of light that we have back in this corner. That's probably about 3 or 4 foot candles back in there. That's what you're supposed to have by code, so we can walk into a space and not have to be squinting and be able to see our way safely to just walk through. Well, we have a little bit more. We have about 10 foot candles in there now, but we've got many other lights above the doors that by code in assisted living have to be there so someone can see the handle, to effectively open the door. We've got those lights now on occupancy sensors. And that was fun. I thought it was very cool because the occupants were a little concerned for a while, like they'd be, someone with walkers and things like walking slowly down the hallway, and suddenly the light would come on around them. They're like, what is happening? Even though they'd been informed this change was going to happen, but now people say they really like it. There's a little dim, and they start walking down the halls, then the light starts to come on more as they walk down. And it's been a very good way to save energy because even with LEDs, to have them on 24/7 is wasteful. Anything like that, having it shut off is always better. So we had some control with that. Put in new rooftop units, higher efficiency on the air conditioning side. Unfortunately, the time when we put these in, there were not yet 90% efficient on the natural gas side rooftop units. They now exist, which are fantastic, so higher efficiency areas. So again, on the residential side, most of our furnaces, if they're 10 to 20 years old and they have just galvanized steel coming out of them, not plastic, they're 80% efficient, or they could be, if they're older than that, they could be down in the 60% efficiency range. But when you have plastic piping coming out of your furnace, if you have those, you're at least 90% efficient on those. And that's what we finally are getting to now with rooftop units, having a secondary heat exchanger to suck out more of the heat and not dump it up into the atmosphere, but use it to heat the space that's there. We did domestic hot water recirculation upgrades. They had systems in there that were very inefficient, the cheapest things that contractor could have found, basically, with timers on that. I already talked about the shutoffs, the windows. Put on window film to reduce heat gain. And window film has its applications. I know there's some companies that advertise it like crazy and talk about all kinds of savings. We did not see as big a savings with this as we expected. So we did an experiment just on parts of the windows, and right now I'd say, it was okay, not good, because they just had double pane windows, non-low-E coated windows. People know what low-E coating is on windows. Does that make sense? It's okay if it doesn't make sense. Low-E coatings are now, basically it was a technology that was developed in the 1990s, started to get applied really in the 2000s, and now it's everywhere. Where it's, instead of having a third pane of glass, you can just put on a thin film that's sprayed on one or more of the surfaces of glass that effectively provides the insulation benefits of like a third pane of glass. A lot less weight, a lot less expensive, a lot easier for people to install because of the reduced weight. But very, very good. And the windows that they had in 1998 were just double pane clear windows. So we went with this retrofit of trying to put on a window film, and it was okay. This one has not paid back as well as everything else has. So, and dishwasher, I already talked about it. So, KWs and therms, what have they saved by making these improvements? They cut their consumption of electricity, kilowatt hours is the consumption side, 27% from 2014 levels. So that was in 2015. You've seen that. Oh, there we go. That saved them in both buildings approximately $11,000, which they've been very happy about. Therms went down 14%. Basically, then prior pre-improvements. I cut another $5,200 off of the bills. So their benchmarking score went up from 21 to 57. So that score scale of getting closer to that 75 level, they've made a big jump there, but they still have room to go. But they've done a good job with that. And this is part of what motivates us in our company is like they've basically taken the equivalent of 50 cars off the road with what they've done in reducing their consumption. The electricity savings was having the bigger benefits as far as carbon dioxide emissions. The natural gas reductions did contribute to this, but the electricity savings was the big benefit on that. So 205 metric tons a year. I'll just give you, in a moment I'll give you a visual. Oh, actually, I don't have that in this presentation. I always try to picture like what a ton of CO2 is. Like how do you, okay, a metric ton, not so different from an English unit of ton, not so different, but basically what, how big is it, like this big, or that big? there's a great visual I don't think I have in this presentation, sadly, but people in Britain did a nice job of showing the volume of what a ton would be. It's about, I'd say about 5 feet taller than a double-decker bus, and that's the diameter, so like a bubble of that. So like 5 feet taller than a double-decker British bus in diameter is about the volume that you'd have to have the CO2 to equate to a ton worth of it. So I was like, good, I can start to get a picture of this in my head of like what that would mean. So 50 cars worth 205 double-decker buses in diameter of volume. That's a lot of CO2 that doesn't have to be going into the atmosphere with what they've done. So on this demand side, I already started hitting on this. The demand side is, there you go. Demand side is a big part of their bill. So especially if any of you own buildings, you'd be very curious about this. They tend to hide some of the costs and their fees, unfortunately. So it really ends up being more like $19 per kW in the summertime, and more like 15 and a quarter, basically in the rest of the year per kW. So if you knock off 20 kW, 20 times $20, it's $160 a month that you knock off of that. So it gets to be pretty dang good stuff. $324 a month, spring, fall, winter. $383 in the summer that they were able to get, and that's part of where we're still working with them, is on ways to further dial that in and get further savings from that. So $4,200 a year in savings from the demand side. So we had the consumption side and now the demand side. $6,000 in both buildings approximately. We've been very focused on this building. We've been doing monitoring and observation in the other building. That's why my data's much more precise, I guess, on this one, and a little less so on the other building. So bottom line, and then we'll get to CPACE. They spent $234,000. Xcel Energy at that time, and their rebates are still in this range of generosity. They bought down a nice big chunk. That's 20% approximately, of the costs. So a net expense of $189,000. From that. So they're currently saving about $22,000 a year. They're into their now 4th year of payback, and they're still on pace for this to be true, that it'll be paid back for them in another 4 years. And the people are, well, this was the thing that was most rewarding for us. People that were there, living there, said the kitchen, the dining area is finally not freezing in both summer and winter, because it tended to be freezing all the time. And the people living on the 3rd floor were saying, we finally get heat. We finally get cooling. We finally have comfort in the space. And so family members, as well as the people there, gave a lot of very positive feedback in the first year, and that was very nice to get that. So we knew that we had done good.
If you included the carbon emissions, if you took that into picture, what would be the benefits? Double of that?
Like of those 205?
Yeah, because they don't consider that externalities, right?
Right. Yeah. As far as like the line loss and things like that, you're saying? Okay. Or you just saying?
Yeah, carbon.
Right. So yeah, like I'm saying, we estimated that they've reduced it by 205 metric tons of CO2 per year.
How much would that be, if you put it in dollar terms?
Oh, right. If we quantified it, exactly. If there was a carbon tax or cap and trade program or something like they have in California. You're right. They should be. They should get some financial reward, in my opinion, for doing that for the rest of our benefits. Right. I agree with you. All right. So yeah. So more comfort. First, second floors. First and third floors in particular is where we saw the biggest comfort benefits. We're still doing the real-time monitoring, of that. So how to pay for this? They did not have the benefit of doing this through the CPACE program, but I want to walk you through this and ask you to share it with others, about this program, because this is a cool program that's out there, especially for property owners that are looking to sell a multifamily property or a commercial property anytime soon. Why? Is because you can put these energy efficiency and renewable energy improvements onto the property tax, and a little bit like your sewer tax, it doesn't stick with the previous owner, it carries forward with the building. So as you can imagine, very appealing if you own a building and you can invest $234,000 into something, and if you sell it within a year, that loan just goes with the property. It doesn't stick to my credit or stick to my bank or my concerns any further. So it's a great tool to motivate people who are moving properties in the market, and with Colorado's real estate market, especially residential, but we're seeing it in commercial and multifamily as well, being so hot, there are more and more people that could or should be taking advantage of this. So in brief, this gets into less geeky stuff, except if you're into finance. So a little bit more on just financial sides of things. Right now, 100% financing. People don't have to put any money down to do a $234,000 or whatever the improvement level would be. The property would have to be assessed that it's a valuable property. It's no longer based on your credit score or the building owner's credit score. It's based on that property is assessed and appraised at being very valuable. So they're like, oh, in that area, or valuable enough, it's like, yeah, you don't have to put any money down on this because any improvements you do to this will be able to recoup at the time of sale because property values have been going up so much. Long term, you can do financing, and the financing is done through banks. I'll get into some of this in later slides. It's not a state fund. It's, there's banks, there's about 10 that I'm aware of right now that are participating, saying, yeah, we'll offer loans through this program, up to 20-year financing on it with interest rates that are very competitive in the 5-6% interest rate range right now is what we're seeing. I think we saw one in the high 4s even, but that was a bigger amount of money. It lowers energy costs by having improvements done, cash flow positive projects. How this gets approved is that it's through engineering analysis, and I've been an engineer now for 22 years, I guess. But our analyses can be flawed, but it's still a good tool, and they're relying on it right now to say, hey, based on projections of energy savings, we will approve $234,000 of improvements because we see that the utility bills will actually be less than what it costs you on your property taxes to pay back that 6% loan on $234,000. So where there are people in the CPACE program that it's a contractor that the state of Colorado has hired. They came out of Connecticut, where this program has been successful for the last 5 years, I believe. So they're managing it, and they do an oversight of like our engineering analysis and say, yep, we agree the numbers look good. We'll give this approval to send it to the banks that they can trust us that this has been done well, to say that they'll be cash flow positive on the project from day one. So thus far, the project, this is very new, and I'll show you why it's so new, because counties are adopting this as a policy because of our home rule state laws we have here in Colorado. It's, the state statute got passed, but now it's up to the county assessors to adopt it in each county. But anyway, there's, right now the projects that have been approved are cash flow positive projects just in Boulder County. As Boulder adopted it 2 years ago, other counties have been coming on board now after that, but we've been seeing some progress, but it's still very early. This is all like just new stuff, basically. Anyway, again, it's not personally being guaranteed, it's guaranteed on the property. It gets combined with utility, well, you get utility and tax incentives. So utility rebates can apply through this program, like I showed with the Marycrest project. And payment obligation is upon sale, so as I touched on. So again, I'll move through this a little faster since you guys don't own properties. I don't want to get us too bogged down in this. But there's a lot of properties that are eligible for this. Office buildings, not-for-profit, multifamily, retail, all sorts of properties fit into this scope. It doesn't apply to residential properties in the form of single-family homes. So unfortunately, it doesn't apply to what you're all living in. But the buildings that we're in, it applies to. Applies in many, many areas. Like I said, renewables are part of it, but it can be heating, ventilation, replacing rooftops. If you're adding insulation at that time, can be part of this. Motors and pumps, insulation, motors and pumps, lighting. So many different things where it's getting to be applied to. So you can do a whole lot of improvements. We have one apartment building owner in Adams County that's kind of intrigued because Adams County just adopted this, where he had a hailstorm come through, this summer, and looking at getting roofing replaced anyway, and he's thinking about how this can combine if his insurance company doesn't completely reimburse him for this work, how this program might benefit him, because he's got lots of other things to do on that property, but the roofing area is one that drew him in. So again, just another visual where it's showing how it serves a lot of different properties. Right now in other states, Connecticut in particular, this is what they've been seeing as far as who's been adopting it. Retail and industrial have been big, office areas. Who's been taking those on. And the size of the projects, this one kind of impressed me that they've had one that large. We are usually in this scale down in here in what we've been working in, but someone did a very big one in Connecticut, apparently. So, just very big, ranges of what can be covered. There's no limit on the financing. Financing just is based on the value of the property. If the property is I'd have to guess at least a $50 million property or something like that. $8 million of improvements could fit into that, something like that. So just showing that. Now this is, for those of you who would be curious about it, this is what is most interesting because, as I said, the states or the counties are adopting this. And we've recently had these adoptions. Boulder's been there for 2 years. Adams just came in the first of this year, and Broomfield, Eagle, and Jefferson just came in the last month, basically, as far as adoption goes. Denver is looking at adopting it, they said, maybe as soon as October 1st, so next week. We'll see if that is real or how that's playing out. But many other counties are thinking about adopting this and allowing this to happen. But again, we have our home rule state. Each county has to opt in. The state legislature can't say, you must offer this. That's just not how we're constitutionally structured in the state. But they are, right now, seems to be a bit of a trend going, especially if the bigger population areas. It'll be good to see if we get the Fort Collins area involved sooner than later. But I've been talking to some people up there. So anyway, but these areas are adopting. All right. So I said this a little bit before. There aren't any public funds going into this, the financing of this. Some people are like, what is this, government garbage? What's going on? No, it's just a program that's made available, and it's the banks. They're saying, we see how to make money off of this, and we're going to offer loans that fit within the guidelines of this program. So the banks are deciding it, making it eligible. In cases where building owners do not have preferred capital providers, such as the bank, the CPACE program is looking to try and help them get connected. They're trying to build bridges like, hey, we'll help you find a bank, in this case. And a big part of what we even are looking to do, and then what the CPACE program administrators do, is just help get consent from the mortgage holder, because we're oftentimes dealing with people who are occupying the building but don't own the building. So it's like, and that just happens a lot in commercial properties, where it's like, okay, let's get both the tenants and the actual mortgage holder on the same page. And this goes deeper than that, I'm sorry. It's getting them on the same page, but it's also involving the bank that owns the mortgage. So they know that this is another, it's not interfering with them having the first line of, if someone's going into bankruptcy, as it were, that they'd get paid back first, this loan would be paid back second or later on the list. Yeah.
Are you seeing tenants pushing property owners to do these projects?
Just in energy efficiency projects in general, because like CPACE is so new that I don't know of anybody who really knows about it, living with it, unless people have been very close to this. We do see people, like in multifamily projects, we've seen a group of tenants be willing to talk to their landlord about wanting to have things done, even say, yeah, we pay the electricity bills, but we may not live here for the next 5 years. We'd like to do something jointly. And we've had one property owner, a gentleman who owns some properties in the Cap Hill Congress Park area, who's gotten on board with that, where he's done things collaboratively with his tenants to do some upgrades around lighting and to do upgraded refrigerators and upgraded dishwashers. And I mean, he's done other improvements to the building that directly impacts his bill because he pays the natural gas bill for the central heating there from their boiler. But he's done things in a collaborative way there. We've had other people, he said, talk with them, and honestly, I don't know in some cases if some of these people have had luck because they've like called us or talked with us, and they said, call us if you need help, and then we don't hear back from them, type of thing on how that's gone. But I do see more and more people wanting it because, like, I pay the electric bills, and I don't like that my carbon footprint, they're engaged with that thought process is bigger than it needs to be. But, I shouldn't have to be the one paying for the LED light bulb because I may move out in a few months, and these are going to last 10, 20 years, type of thing. So we're seeing that dialogue start to happen more, so it's been cool. So I'll keep rolling with this. So hit on this already. The power of this program is that it's attached to the property, not to the individual, who would own the property. Automatically transfers upon sale. Allows for deeper, more capital-intensive projects with longer paybacks because many people would take out a loan are like, I'm not doing this unless it pays back in 5 years, bud. So because even if I'm own this property for 30 years, I might sell it in the next 5, and I don't know. It's just how many of us think, or many people think. Well, I like it that it makes it where it's like, no, I can go deeper, and if I am going to sell the property, I can even go deeper. This is like I may only pay it for a couple of years, and I hand it off to the next property owner who gets all the benefits of being a newer, healthier, more comfortable building, and away they go with that. So, and obviously it decreases the operating expenses, right away for the people inside. Yep.
With prepayment, or it sounds like it doesn't trigger prepayment, but is there the option
to pay it off early?
Yeah, if someone buys it, particularly maybe if market changes and the buyers have a little more power.
Yeah.
They might want either the owner or themselves to pay it off early or something.
I like that. There's nothing that I've seen that prohibits that from being done. Just kind of like with your mortgage, you can pay it off early, and there's not. Most mortgages I'm aware of have no penalties. Mine doesn't on my house. There's no penalty to pay off early. So I'd say the same thing here. There wouldn't be a penalty. Again,
Restriction against
no, there's no restriction against that. That I'm aware of. Yeah, I guess I'll say it's new enough that I'm hypothesizing that like mortgages, there's not. But I would be surprised, but if there was. But yeah.
Does making improvements on the property affect either the assessed value or the market value of the building? If it increases the assessed value, they're going to get taxed extra.
You're right.
That
That part is true in the cases of Boulder properties where they've made improvements. There's been an increased assessment on the property with new heating systems being put in, new roofs that go in at the times that those happen. So you're right. There is that part of it as well. So that is a little bit of the disincentive that's there. There is the assessors, assessing offices, assessment offices. They basically have been given the tools now to look for energy efficiency things on the MLS in residential and multifamily. I'm less aware on commercial properties, but I know for sure on multifamily and single family they have it on the MLS to be able to add that in. They're still having a hard time finding comparables. So sometimes things like even solar panels don't necessarily increase the value at the time that an appraiser comes in or at the time that a city or county is assessing it. But it's more of that is coming. So that's a very good thought and very true. It's like, okay, I'm getting a little ding on my property taxes while my property tax goes up because I've just added hundreds of thousands of dollars of finance onto it. So it's there. You're right. All right. So let's see. So let's, additionally, the assessment, like I said, it's akin to a sewer assessment, so it just passes on. It's not something that sticks to the property owner. Doesn't affect these areas. per se, but the mortgage holders will be able to assess the property, project's impact on the borrower's, borrower's ability to repay. That's standard with any loan. Like, oh, can you really afford to pay $1,000 a month, or more than that? But let's say it's $1,000 a month, and some of those smaller ones, on the financing of that project or those improvements. There'll be questions that come back, to the mortgage holder about, or information back on the positive cash flow sides of that. There are right now 125 lending institutions around the country. Like I said, there's only 10 right now active in Colorado, but that's because it's a fairly new project, program at this point. Pretty typical stuff is what you'd see with mortgages. They're looking at loan-to-value percentages. In this case, it'd be for the property. Qualifying in these ways, lien-to-value, typically qualifying. So it's, again, very much based on what that property's value is, nothing to do with the owner's side of it. So similar stuff, like to a mortgage. Can't have involuntary liens or be in bankruptcy to be able to be eligible for this. So the old way, we were self-funding, trying to get energy efficiency improvements done. Now, it's having this cash flow focused assessment and engineering assessment, saying, okay, you will be cash flow positive, because that's the other part, coming back to your question, sir, about the increased assessed value of it. I'm actually going to dig into the with these guys at the program a little bit more to see what that's done on some of those bolder projects. But right now, it should be like when we do an engineering analysis, there should be someone trying to estimate what it would be on the property tax side, and that should be part of the equation to say, well, 80% or 90% of the cost is based on the actual financing from the improvements. The other 10 or 20% is that your property taxes are going up with these improvements being done. That should be all part of their evaluation, saying, yes, you are eligible. You're still going to be $1 better off, in theory, than you were under the old system, because your utility bills have dropped that much. So that's why I said engineering analyses are good, but we're not perfect, but they're right now relying on that as their gauge, and I hope they never get to a point of like, oh, that one's $1 away. I'm like, no, right now you can't say that's accurate. We'd say, oh, if you're off maybe 10%, maybe 15%, if you're within that range, you have to have more buffer in there than that. Say, okay, then we'll trust our analysis to be good enough to say, yep, it should be net cash flow positive for you, but that's what they're saying they're approving. So just repeating this stuff. I got this stuff from the guys at CPACE. I'm like, I should clean this up a little bit. Requires no out-of-pocket expense, generate immediate positive cash flow. The new construction pilot is a pretty cool one, and I'm just about done. This one, we're looking at a couple multifamily jobs potentially being involved with this, where it's like, okay, they're going to base it against the code, rely on computer modeling to see if something newly built can take advantage of this type of financing. And it's just cool that it's available. Like I said, we're just involved with some preliminary engineering work on a project that may go this path. So we'll see. And they said they'd love to have us be in the pilot, and so we'll see what happens with that stuff. All right. So our team, if any of you are owning properties, or if you have people who do, we help with communication with the current mortgage holder. We do the assessment, the engineering work, as far as what can be done, provide the technical analysis on the savings, which is part of our assessment. Look for the CPACE people to help develop, we will help develop a financeable project with the building owner. Like, we won't push you to do ground source heat pumps necessarily in retrofitting your building, which would be hundreds of thousands of dollars. We'll look at more cost-effective ways of trying to get the building to be more energy efficient. We're looking for the best fit financing. That's where the CPACE folks come in and help connect with banks. And so we say, let's get on started. But with that, I'll wrap up and take questions, and we're just before 1 o'clock, so I managed to stay within time, basically. Yeah, thank you.